Make this the best Halloween ever by pre-ordering my 2 brand new books coming out soon. The first is Phantom Phenomena, a hand-picked collection of the all-time scariest stories I've ever received, accompanied by atmospheric illustrations and field notes. Then there's Appalachian Folklore, an extraordinary catalog of the chilling history, creepy folklore, and rich culture of the Appalachians. These release October 15th and 8th, respectively. Pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. But hurry, because the first 100 pre-orders to verify via the link in the description or at eeriecast.com/verify will receive an exclusive hoodie and hardcover copy of Lore, a folklore horror novel. Demon is a word you can use to describe any frequent, troublesome thing. Spiders, the neighbor kids, the IRS. But when it comes down to actual demons, they are far, far worse. Welcome back to Unexplained Encounters. I'm Darkness Prevails, and you should come listen to me discuss raunchy stuff on my show Darkness Plays on Spotify or YouTube. Today's episode features a brand new set of terrifying and allegedly real demon encounters, so hold on to your Ouija boards. Enjoy, and if you have a scary story of your own, send it to me at darkstories.org. Now, let's begin. The Haunted Mickey Doll, from Am Jean Romeo. When I first laid eyes on the old Victorian house on Gosford Street, it felt like something out of a dream. Tall with weathered brick walls and ivy creeping up the sides, a once grand home dulled by the passage of time. The large windows, framed by dark wood shutters, hinted at the house's age and the many lives it had sheltered over the decades. It was the perfect mix of charm and mystery, and the price was too good of a deal to pass up. In retrospect, that absurdly good deal should have been my first clue. Moving day was a blur of boxes, furniture, and exhaustion. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I was surrounded by half-opened boxes. The room was lit by the soft glow of a single lamp, casting long shadows across the floor. The house creaked as it settled for the night. The sound was almost like a sigh, a tired exhale from the walls that had seen so much. I decided to explore the attic before calling it a night. The narrow staircase groaned under my weight as I went up. A cloud of dust greeted me when I pushed open the heavy wooden door. I blindly reached a hand out for the light switch, and my fingers made contact with the cord. I pulled it taut, and with a soft click, the room was engulfed in the flickering light of one of those long and rectangular fluorescent bulbs. I gazed at the room before me. It was cluttered with old furniture, forgotten trunks, and relics of lives long past. As I picked through the piles, I noticed a small weathered box tucked away in the far corner. It was covered in cobwebs and looked as if it hadn't been touched in years. My curiosity piqued. I dragged it into the middle of the room and carefully lifted the creaking lid. Inside, nestled in a bed of yellowed newspaper, was a vintage Mickey Mouse toy. The toy was old, decades old likely, with faded fabric and a permanently cheerful grin etched into its plastic face. One of its button eyes was slightly askew, giving it this unsettling lopsided gaze. There was something about it. Something that drew me in, despite its worn appearance. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something told me I needed to bring the doll out of the attic. Following that strange instinct, I left the attic and made my way back downstairs. I placed the doll carefully at the center of a bookshelf that had been built into the wall to the left of the fireplace. A twin shelf sat on the other side, which I'd already started to fill with my own knickknacks. Once I was happy the doll was sat in a good position, I stepped back and admired it. Its cheerful grin made me smile, and I just stood there for a while, just zoning out. My phone then buzzed in my pocket. I shook myself and headed up to bed. A week passed by and I was starting to settle in nicely into my new home. Mickey still sat pride of place on the shelf. I'd placed a couple of other bears I kept for sentimental reasons, and a porcelain doll I had since childhood on the bookshelf too. Strangely enough, they kept falling off randomly throughout the week. The porcelain doll, who had affectionately been named Annie by my mother when I was a child, had come close to breaking one night. I'd just been about to head to bed when I heard a thunk near the fireplace. I was startled to find that Annie had slumped to the side and was slowly slipping from the shelf. I quickly darted across the room and grabbed her before she could fall. As I cradled Annie close in relief, I heard another doll thud and shifted my eyes to see that the Mickey doll had now also fallen, his plastic face lying against the shelf, with its button eyes staring directly at me. I felt a shiver run through my whole body as I instinctively grabbed the other bears and carried them along with Annie up to my bedroom. Once the door was shut behind me, I carefully placed all the childhood toys down on the bed. For the first time since I'd moved in, I made use of the large ornate key that had sat in the keyhole and locked the door. For added measure, I placed the key inside a drawer in my dresser. I knew I was probably being irrational, but what had just happened with the Mickey doll downstairs had freaked me the heck out. It was like it was deliberately trying to push any other doll or bear away from the shelf, as if the bookcase was its space and nothing else's. As frightened as I was, I didn't get rid of the Mickey doll right away. I guess I wanted to see if anything else was going to happen, but maybe it was more so that I was too scared to go anywhere near it. After that night, I avoided the living room at all costs, only using the kitchen and going straight up to my bedroom when I got home from work. My bedroom also had an attached bathroom, which meant once I locked myself in my room for the night, I would not need to leave the safety of my room until the morning. That isn't to say the locked door stopped any more strange occurrences from happening, though. One morning, something jolted me from sleep in the early hours. I wiped my groggy eyes and sat up. The early morning light was just starting to filter in around the edge of the curtains. It was then that I heard what had woke me up. A soft thud sounded against the outside of my bedroom door. All traces of sleep vanished then, and I stared at that door. The sound came again. It sounded like something small hitting against the wood of the door. The noise came again, louder this time, and I had to cover my mouth to stifle a shriek. The thudding sound suddenly stopped, and my blood ran cold as I heard a high-pitched giggling noise coming from right behind the door. It didn't sound human, and the laughing grew louder, taking on this maniacal cadence. All of a sudden, the door handle began to rattle violently, and I screamed. Like a small child, I threw the covers over my head and covered my ears, just hoping it was all a nightmare. The laughing continued as I cowered under the covers. I don't know how long it went on for, but the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of silence. I scrambled out from under the blankets and checked the time. It was about 11 a.m., and fortunately, it was the weekend. I strained my ears, and all I could hear was the usual creaking noises of an old house. My bedroom door still stood shut and locked, and I plonked back on the bed, sighing in relief. I knew what I'd heard and experienced, but part of me was now wondering if it had all simply been a dream. I mean, a doll falling off a shelf was one thing, but the demonic-sounding laughter of a Mickey doll trying to break into my room was a whole other level of crazy. I recently cautiously checked out the rest of the house, just to be sure it wasn't some deranged squatter who had broke into my house. However, all the doors and windows were still firmly locked, and the Mickey doll was back in its usual place, staring at me with that creepy grin. I'm not sure what to do now. Go stay at a hotel for a little while? What if that night wasn't a dream? Would this give things a chance to calm down and go back to normal? Heck, if I'm the one going crazy, maybe time away will help reset my brain back to its original settings. Or Do I just get the heck out of here and sell the house the first chance I get? I'm currently sitting in my living room, trying to push down the foreboding feeling I'm getting in staying here. I only turned away for a moment, but I swear that Mickey doll just moved. Its head was not in that position a moment ago. Screw it. Tonight I'm finding a hotel. Demon Encounter. From Hunter M. I was 16 years old when my mother divorced my stepfather. We moved into a 2-bedroom, 2-bath duplex in a private airport. The layout of the place was simple. When you walked inside, you could see all the way to the back sliding glass door. The first bedroom was to your right, followed by the guest bathroom, and then finally the master bedroom, which had its own bathroom inside. So that was 3 doors all on the right and spaced around 8 feet apart. The kitchen, living room, and dining room were all together in this open area between the front and back doors. We started experiencing paranormal activity almost immediately, starting with all 3 of the doors slamming at once. This really scared us the first few times it happened. We started noticing our yellow lab, Duke, acting scared for no reason. Then his behavior started to change beyond that. He would sit with his head buried in a corner, almost as if he was trying to hide from something. At first, I was in denial, until one day after school I fell asleep on the couch, with Duke lying on the floor directly in front of me. All of a sudden, I was jolted awake by my dog yelping, like something was hurting him. When I looked at him, I swear it looked like something had a hold of his tail and was pulling him backwards. Now, in that panic, I didn't notice at first, but when I stood up, I felt the temperature around me was icy cold. Keep in mind, this was summertime in Florida, so that's not normal. There was also a terrible sulfur smell that made me gag. This was the first time the entity physically tried to hurt one of us, but it would not be the last. The paranormal disturbances continued throughout the first year, such as our big home stereo system that would turn on by itself, and the only sound it would make would be white noise. And if you listened closely, it sounded like people were screaming in pain. Millions of people. I already had been feeling whatever this was something evil, so I started to do some research on the house. I did find that the owner of the air park had a son who was connected to a few people's deaths in the past, but was never charged, as no evidence was found. I also found out that he and 3 of his friends lived in this house, until his friends' untimely deaths. The autopsy reports stated that all 3 men died of a drug overdose, which doesn't seem very strange until I found out that none of the 3 men had a history of heavy drug use. That's when I started to realize that these people had to have been drugged without their knowing. After digging into the deaths that were linked to this guy in the past, I found out that the deaths were also drug overdoses. The paranormal activity started getting progressively worse after learning this information. But if only I knew it was about to get a lot worse. The atmosphere in the house had become heavy and depressing. You could almost feel the evil hanging in the air. More things started to happen, starting with spiders and scorpions being found all around the house. Poisonous spiders, such as black widows and brown recluses. My mother was even bitten by a brown recluse a short time later. It seemed that we were all either getting injured or getting sick while we were in that house. My little brother ended up getting a terrible infection in his eye that was very serious and could have cost him his vision or even his life. Our poor dog was being tormented so much he refused to leave the corner now, except to eat and drink. Not long after my mother was bitten by the spider, I started to see things. At first, it was just seeing shadows from the corners of my eyes, but eventually, it turned into seeing full-fledged human-shaped masses that would just stand over me in my bed. Now, I'll take a moment to say I don't believe this demonic entity was the spirit of one of the people that overdosed and died in the place. But I do think the demon was attached to the house because of the terrible things that happened there. Over time, the demon started to move closer to me until it was right on top of me. I knew this thing was trying to get inside of me, and I had to do something. I didn't mention this before, as it didn't pertain to this story until now. The house had a 2-car garage attached separately between our side of the duplex and the neighboring side, meaning you couldn't enter the garage from the house. You would have to walk outside, down the sidewalk, and open the garage door from the outside. Now, when you opened the garage, the light switch was on the back wall, and beside the light switch was 2 garage opener buttons. The buttons were lit up by a small internal light, so you could see where they were even when it was dark. This was how I would find the light switch when I went out to do laundry at night. I don't know why, but I always felt like the garage was where all the evil energy liked to be. I never found out for sure, but my gut told me that was where at least one of the men had died. One night I went out to do the laundry, like I had 1,000 times before. Open the garage door, look for the light on the wall, and try my best to not hit my shins on one of the mini toolboxes and other junk on the floor. As I was feeling my way to the light switch, I couldn't see the light on the wall. It took me a second to realize that the light was being blocked by an enormous black mass. It's completely dark in there now, but this mass was so much darker that it still managed to stand out even in that pitch blackness. In an instant, it was right on top of me. I felt completely paralyzed. I could then make out slight facial features, a mouth, ears, a nose. But what truly horrified me were its eyes. I'd heard other people describe a demon's eyes before. Some say they're red, others say green, but not this one. The creature before me had the deepest, darkest black eyes I've ever seen. I began to realize its eyes were what was holding me in place. I don't know how, but I just knew that's how it had control of me. I noticed there was a very faint gray pupil in the center of its eyes, which gave it an even more terrifying look. I felt that at any second, this thing was going to just tear me apart, and I thought there was nothing I could do. Until a memory came into my mind from childhood of my grandmother telling me that if I ever came face to face with anything like this, to rebuke it in the name of the Lord. At the time, I felt like it wouldn't help. But what else could I do? So I just started repeating, "I rebuke you in God's name," slowly and weakly at first. Then eventually I began screaming in my most powerful voice that I could muster. The creature showed no reaction until the last second. It moved backwards and shrank in on itself, until letting out a noise I can only describe as a scream. It sounded like the howling of a Category 5 hurricane. It was so powerful I could actually feel the sound, almost like getting hit with a blast of icy wind. The demon then charged at me, and then through me. The cold that I felt pass through me was indescribable, but the pain felt as if someone had shot me in the chest with a shotgun loaded with cold needles. I fell to my knees out of breath. I still had goosebumps on my arm from the cold, but without looking around, I could feel that the demon was gone. I jumped to my feet and ran inside, startling my mother as I burst through the door. I half expected her to ask me what all the noise was, but I could tell from her facial expression that she hadn't heard a thing and had no idea what happened. She did ask what was wrong, but for some reason I couldn't say, so I lied. I told her that I just got spooked by something outside, but I wasn't sure exactly what. I didn't tell her until years later after we had long since moved away from that place. The house is still there, and I just hope that the demon left for good that night in the garage. My experience with my haunted house. From Athena Martinez 617. I had just moved into a new house that was 107 years old in Dallas, Oregon. With the house being that old, many people had died there. Just a few days after moving in, I began to hear sounds from upstairs. I went to check it out, but saw absolutely nothing up there. I wondered, though, what was making that sound. I went back downstairs to watch a movie with my sisters. After the movie, I went to bed, and while in bed, I heard footsteps coming from the attic. Startled, I asked my dad to see what was up there. My father saw absolutely nothing, so he just brushed it off and said, "You're probably having a bad dream." I ignored it then, until the next day when I saw something strange. Now, I always take showers at night when everyone is in bed. When I was taking a shower, something started coming out of the shower head. It wasn't water. This was something else. I'm not sure what. It was a sort of black goo coming out of the shower head. I asked my dad to check it out, and when he did, he saw nothing unusual except for a lot of hair in the shower head. There was nothing more I could do, so I went on to bed. The next morning when I woke up, I saw that my sister was not in her bed. I went downstairs to check if she was in the kitchen making breakfast, but when I got there, she wasn't there either. After not finding her anywhere, I was getting really worried. Skip ahead 4 hours. My parents had called the police. She was officially missing. Everybody in our neighborhood started to look for her. Not a trace of her was found until, oddly enough, a month later. Now, keep in mind, during that month, everything was peaceful. No strangeness occurred in the house, and I began to wonder, maybe the thing that was haunting this place had taken her. Well, late one day, I was making missing posters because the ones we'd hung up were being taken down every day by some people. I then heard a noise outside, a knocking at my window. I opened it, and there was my sister. She was covered in blood and seemed confused. I took her straight to my parents. We were overjoyed to see that she was alive and okay. We reported this to the police and told the neighbors, and everyone was very happy. But my sister was different. I couldn't quite tell why yet. She just didn't seem like the same person. For starters, she wouldn't tell us how she went missing, and for her sake, my parents eventually stopped asking. We also assumed that her different behavior was from her going missing for a month. The night she came home, she slept with my parents. So I slept alone in my bedroom. I was hoping to sleep with her in our bedroom. I'd missed her so much. Everything started to go back to normal after that night. The voices and noises I would hear at night before she went missing came back though, basically as soon as she came back. One night, about 4 months after she had disappeared and we found her, I heard a knock at my door. I opened up the door to see my little sister. She hugged me. My sister doesn't do hugs. She had been abused as a child and didn't hug people. So I thought this was kind of a strange experience. But I shrugged it off. After all, maybe it was proof that she was missing me very much as well, or at least had a very bad dream. I asked her what was wrong. She told me in an odd tone that didn't sound like her normal voice that she'd had a bad dream, one in which she had gone missing. Again, we still hadn't figured out how she left the house or if someone took her. I really didn't know what to say to that. That night, she slept with me. When one of my parents woke up in the morning, they panicked, wondering where she'd gone. So I opened the door and said that she was in here with me. I then went to go get her out of bed. When I went up to the top bunk, I didn't see her. She was gone, and I felt that fear rise up again. I started to look everywhere, wondering where she'd gone this time. I ran to my parents then, swearing up and down that she was just in my room. We began to search for her around the house. We couldn't find her until about an hour later, just before we were about to call the cops again. She was hiding in the trees in our backyard. She told us she had been playing tag with one of her friends. This was odd, because she didn't have any friends. My sister is not a very social person. She keeps to herself, doesn't really like physical contact. So we were very surprised when she came to us saying that she was playing tag with a friend. I asked, "When did you get a friend? Can you tell me about them?" She was completely silent though. She just ran up to our bedroom. I couldn't get her to open up about it. At this point in time, we'd already lived in the house for about a year, so the sounds and the noises were kind of familiar now. We were getting used to them. We would hear them every day, every night, every hour, even every minute. But one night was different. I was taking my usual shower, and that black goo began to come out of the faucet again. So I then turned on all the water sources in my bathroom. The same black goo began to come out of my sink, then out of the drain. It was coming out of everywhere. I was scared enough to scream. My father came running in, asking what was wrong. When I pointed at the faucet, of course, the black goo was not there. I tried to explain to him that it had just been there, but he didn't believe me. He never did about these things, but I wasn't lying about this. Just in case, my dad went down to the pipes the next morning to check it out. He didn't see much out of the ordinary until he got to the end of the pipe. There he found wooden sticks and jewelry and some ritual symbols. My dad started to freak out, screaming that we needed to leave. But we couldn't afford to buy a new house or leave at the time, so there was nowhere for us to go. We had to stay there in that house. My father took out all the ritual stuff and laid it down on the floor in the living room. He took pictures of it and looked it up on Google to see what it was. He found a picture. It was an ancient ritual that was used a lot back in the day. We don't know what the ritual was about, but we knew it couldn't be good. We called a priest to see what was going on. He kicked us out of our house for a while, then went inside. He came out 4 hours later, saying that he had fought things inside the house and that something was living there with us. He explained he needed to cleanse every single one of us and the house itself. We all got into a line, and he saged us. My little sister was freaking out because she didn't like the smell of the smoke, and she thought that the priest was going to burn her. Then he said that he needed to sprinkle holy water on all of us. We're not religious and never have been, but at this point we were desperate. We needed what this man was offering. My little sister kept refusing the holy water, not letting it touch her skin, saying she was afraid that it was going to burn. We told her it wasn't acid or anything, just water, but she still wouldn't let us. We thought this was strange, as she was saying before she wanted this all to end. We skipped my little sister due to her complaints, but I was very suspicious of that. I kept a closer eye on her afterwards. Later that day, she went into the bathroom, saying she had to go, so I left her alone for that little minute. She stayed in there for a long time, so I decided to go check on her. When I opened up the door, I saw something I wish I never would have seen. She was there, floating above the ground, black goo coming out of her eyes. Her mouth was wide open, and she started to scream. I ran to go get the priest, who was still there talking to my parents. He ran up with me and grabbed her, sitting her on the dining room table. He started a true-to-life exorcism, and my sister was screaming in pain the entire time. During the exorcism, the priest was asking her questions, asking if she was still there, and something answered. Something that wasn't her, because it had a voice that was not my sister's, saying to us that she was now gone, that it had taken her and they were never giving her back. I grabbed my sister and looked her straight in the eyes, but I wasn't really looking at my sister. I was looking at a demon, an entity, something else. With tears in my eyes, I screamed at the top of my lungs for it to take me instead and to leave my sister alone, that she's innocent. I don't remember much after that, because I blacked out, but I do remember as everything went black, I felt something weird inside of me. When I came to, my sister seemed different in a good way. She was scared and screaming and crying, saying how something had taken her, and she didn't want it to take her again. I found that some marks had appeared on my skin. They looked like crosses etched into my body. My family ran me to the hospital, but they couldn't do much more than bandage me up. So then my family took me to a church. I was sat on this red carpet, and an exorcism was then performed on me. I was shaking. I could feel it. Something was talking to me from inside, telling me how I needed to do things for it, and it would let me go. Things like stabbing the priest that was trying to get it out. I begged it to not make me do that. The entity didn't care, and said if I wanted to be free, I would have to do this. I gathered all my strength. It said to me it would lead me to the priest. Then it told me to look to my left. There was a big wooden cross there, with a pointed end. It said that it wanted me to grab the cross and stab the priest with it. I told it I had never done something like that before, but the entity told me that it was all going to be okay and that I would be set free. Before I could proceed with the entity's instructions, I suddenly woke up as if I'd blacked out again. I felt lighter, more free. But I came to screaming, terrified, and looking for my sister to make sure she was there and okay. As soon as I saw her, I hugged her so unbelievably tight I nearly choked her. After these crazy events, everything seemed to go back to normal. But actually normal this time. No noises, no sounds, no black goo coming out of the pipes. There was nothing. We were a normal family again. A year later, my mother had gotten pregnant. When she announced it to us, we were excited, of course. We were going to have a little sister. Fast forward to the night she went into labor. The house suddenly felt cold as soon as it happened. My mom and dad rushed to the hospital. After a long while, they came home, bringing the new baby. As soon as she came in, she cried so loud and didn't stop. We were wondering if there was something wrong with her. I remember looking everywhere for something to comfort her, but nothing seemed to work, not even my mom's milk. The only way we got her to calm down was to take her outside the house. So we went to my grandmother's. My new baby sister was just not having it in that house, crying again every time she went inside. So grandma's was the only option. At that point, my mother was very tired. One night after my mom was done working, she sat my little sister in the bouncer. My mother forgot her all the time in the bouncer because she was so tired and wanted to go take a nap somewhere. Anyway, I saw that Mom had forgotten about her again, so I called out to her and said, "Mom, you forgot Jane." I went to grab her myself, and that's when I saw something. A hand going to the handle of her bouncer, and I heard a voice say, "Go." But I refused to leave. I reached out to grab my little sister, but she slipped out of my hands, and I was flung across the room by some force. These stairs were right behind the bouncer, and I ended up falling down them. I was in a lot of pain and terrified, screaming for my parents. My father came running, seeing me lying on the ground, bleeding. I was covered in cuts and bruises. We went to the church again to see the priest. He told us that something was back, but it wasn't the same thing that had gone inside me. but something that had descended from it when it left. We took the baby with us, and something started to happen to her. She kept passing out, and at one point we couldn't wake her up. As my mom held her, something kept trying to pull her out of my mom's hands. My mom was too weak to hold on to her, so she let go, and something took the baby. I swear I saw it running with the child, and we looked everywhere for her, our newborn baby that was innocent, still had such a long life to live. We couldn't find the baby, but we could hear her crying every night. We would hear her screaming she was missing for a month, just like my other sister. We knew what was coming next, so we called the priest, and we said it was happening again, but instead with our 1-month-old baby sister. We finally found her. She was in the attic. My dad was checking if something was up there, and found her there crying. There were also some ritual items and things like that on the walls, and there was this odd cracking sound too. My dad ran with my little sister, saying that the entity had not taken her, but instead wanted to keep her. My dad apparently had heard a voice in the attic, telling him that they didn't want to possess her, that they wanted to keep the girl as their own. My baby sister was kept at the church along with my mother and other sister. It was just me and my dad back home. At one point I went to take a shower, but instead of black goo, I swear blood began to come out of the shower head. I walked out of my door, and I saw something. It looked like my baby sister. I steadily walked over to her, and I reached down to touch her shoulder, saying, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at church." She then turned to look at me and screamed. This wasn't my sister. I recalled then the priest had given us a little bottle of holy water attached to a necklace. I quickly ran to get it and poured it on that thing that looked like my sister. I screamed for it to get out, to leave. It disintegrated. There was a puddle of black goo left on the carpet. I felt relieved then, because I believed we'd finally gotten rid of it. My dad grabbed a jar and put the goo inside. We took it to the church, and the priest said that we had removed it. When we checked the attic, there was nothing out of the ordinary there. Everything seemed like it should have been. We're doing fine now. My little sister Jane is now doing well, and so is Scarlett. She hugs us a lot more now. But that was the scariest time of my life, and I hope nothing ever happens like that again. The birthday I wish never happened. From Gremlin626. I've always been interested in the paranormal and witchcraft genres from a very young age. I'm from Tennessee and grew up in a small, not really well-known town. It was my 11th birthday when I would begin to wish it had stayed as just an interest. Because my birthday fell in a month that usually had snow and was cold, my aunt let me have a slumber party for my birthday at her house every year. This time, there were 7 girls invited, and 2 of them were my cousins. One of these girls I only knew because everyone swore we looked identical, but she was 2 years younger, though we have no relation at all. I'll call them A, my older cousin, B, my little cousin, C, the doppelganger, D, my best friend, E, the classmate who suggested this in the first place, F, the tattletale, and G, the one who refused to participate. I'd been digging into my family ancestry and grew up hearing about my family's stories and legends that have been passed down from both my Celtic and Native American, specifically Comanche Nation, ancestry. All of my mother's side supposedly had some sort of ability or sensitivity to the dead. Knowing this, they warned me all the time to never participate in any form of seance, because our sensitivity can attract things, negative entities, like moths to a lamp. I should have listened. My party had been a bit boring until E decided that a seance circle would be the thing to make this party the best one yet. Knowing how my family felt about this, I wanted to say no, but I didn't want to seem scared to my friends, or boring. In order for this to work, I had to convince everyone to wait until after the adults went to bed. So, until then, we all decided painting our nails and watching the latest ghost adventures in my room would be the best way to pass the time. It was a cold, clear night with barely a moon showing in the waxing crescent phase. We waited until all the adults had gone to bed to sneak outside the back door, which wasn't until around 2:30 a.m. We then set up candles all around the deck at equal distances from one another, and waited in the 20-degree temperature in our fuzzy pajamas and coats for the witching hour, which is said to be 3 a.m. by some folks. Then we began. My aunt's house was next to and across from large fields, and only 2 neighbors were directly behind her house that sat on a full acre in the middle. I knew the neighbors were elderly and most definitely asleep as well, and that's what made this night so peculiar. There wasn't any wind, and the only sounds that could be heard were the neighbors' dogs and us girls giggling, along with the nature that was around us. I went around lighting the candles one by one, because I didn't want one of the others to accidentally light the deck on fire somehow. G started to get scared. "I don't feel good about this, guys." E didn't seem very pleased with that and rudely whispered back, "If you're going to be such a baby about this, why don't you go back inside? It's way past your bedtime with that attitude." A couple of the other girls snickered, which they would later regret. G sat down in a chair by the doors. "I'm not scared. I just think this is dumb and fake. Nothing will happen." She lied, and in the process, probably jinxed us. We all got in a circle except for G. "We need to hold hands, and remember, do not let go, no matter what, until the circle is dismissed," I warned. I don't think any of them took me seriously, but they also didn't get told how annoying crying ghosts are at 2 a.m. I let E start the circle. "If there's anyone here, give us a sign." A pause and nothing, which caused E to get frustrated and impatient. "I said give us a sign." "Not so loud, we might wake them up," I scolded her. Then all of a sudden, everything around us got scarily quiet. I'd always been told when nature goes silent, run and hide. "Nothing is happening," C deadpanned. "Shh, do you guys not hear that?" D asked, then looked at me wide-eyed, making me nod slightly. "It got a little too quiet." A said the obvious, then looked at me with this look I could only see from the candle that said we should not have done this. B gasped loudly and said, "Did no one see that?" "See what?" E demanded while we all looked around. I was about to ask what, but then I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye was a flash of something moving by, and then the candles all went out at once. No wind was present. B started to cry and did the one thing I warned us all not to do. She let go of the hands. "B, I said not to do that," I scolded her. Then a candle beside me had a flame flicker back to life that made all of us gasp. Then, one by one, they all lit up again. I felt a very unwelcoming presence behind me. Both A and B, who were across from me, were staring past me now with terrified expressions, while the others all looked freaked out. I slowly turned my head, and I saw a tall, dark mass with only a white mask for a face, no eyes or place for a mouth or a nose. It felt of emptiness, and it was standing right behind me, right there. We all screamed. It responded with a god-awful screech that reminded me of nails on a chalkboard. We all ran as fast as possible into the house, locking the doors. I barely made it in, when I saw over my shoulder that thing come to grab me. I let out another loud cry, bursting into the house and locking the door. Just as I shut the door, though, I made eye contact with it. Due to all the commotion, my aunt had woke up. She came running out of her room. "What did you do?" she cried. "I warned you never to do this." She quickly ran to the downstairs storage area, grabbing a bundle of sage and beginning to smudge us all. The entity was furious, crying out again from outside, seemingly circling the house. "You have to dismiss the circle," my aunt instructed us. We all quickly joined hands. "I dismiss this circle. You have to go back to where you came. You cannot stay. Goodbye." We all repeated this until the whole world seemingly went quiet. Then we heard the beautiful notes of a bird, meaning it was over. Well, it was over for my friends at least. My aunt and I had to go through a cleansing of me and the property, binding the thing that tried to attach itself to me. What was meant to be a harmless chat with those who had passed quickly turned into an almost demonic possession, had my aunt not woke up when she did. It actually took us several years before it was finally gone. I still to this day do a monthly cleansing and protection ritual just to be safe. I don't know what it was, and I never wanted to find out. Names have a way of calling things like that back to you, so not knowing is probably for the best. It's now been 12 years since that night, and I still remember the terror and adrenaline I felt in that moment. My dad is haunted by a demon. From Noel. This story happened about 4 or 5 years ago. I was 15 or 16 then. My sister and I moved states with our mom after our parents got divorced. I was 7 years old, and things were always wrong at my dad's house. We were pretty used to seeing and feeling things as we both grew up being extremely sensitive to the supernatural and paranormal. In this particular house, there was no less paranormal activity than in any other house my dad had lived in. My sister and I were convinced that my dad had something following him. But on to the story. When my sister and I went back to visit my dad one summer, it had to be around 3 a.m. I was sitting in my bedroom on the floor, texting my cousin. The way the house is set up, straight across from my room is my adopted brother's room, with a bathroom between us. I started to feel nauseous and got a mild headache. I looked up because I heard rustling from my brother's room. What I saw haunts my nightmares to this day. Standing in his doorway, peeking behind the door, was a tall figure. It was darker than black, with holes for eyes. Its fingers were wrapped around the door. Long fingers, maybe 10 inches, and looked more like knives. It stared at me for a solid 30 seconds before backing away into the room. I panicked and ran into my brother's room, fearing for his safety. I pushed the door open to find nothing. I was scared then, my adrenaline pumping. I pulled out my phone and called my sister, who was in the room upstairs from me. She was in hysterics, crying and gasping for air. I was asking her what was wrong, and she said she saw a black figure with long black fingers and no eyes, crawling over her curtain above her bed and crawling towards her. It was at this point that I was just silent. I finally came to my senses and explained to her what I'd seen. I went upstairs and stayed in her room with her that night. The following day, my dad came to my sister and me, telling us of these scratches he had all down his legs that had no explanation. Things only seemed to escalate from there. My little brother started to have suicidal thoughts. This was crazy, because he was only 11 at the time. My dad was starting to get angry and violent. Doors would slam in your face, unlock and open themselves. Our dogs would be terrified of the basement and bark at open rooms. Finally, when we got the courage, we talked to my dad about the happenings, and he started to read the Bible again, day in and day out. Things were weird then. Strange, unlucky things would continue to happen. Things would break, dogs would die, cars would break down. There were family troubles and things going missing. This continued for months, and then finally, all the activity stopped in the house, along with the bad luck. Years later, my dad told us a story about when my sister was a baby. She was in her crib, and my dad went to check on her. He saw this same figure my sister and I described huddled over her crib, and he'd seen that same figure for the next 20 years. Things went downhill recently, and my dad sank into a deep hole. Paranormal things started to happen again. Voices, footsteps, doors opening and closing. We had no dogs at that point, as they'd all passed away, but my dad's cat would be terrified of specific places in the house. Finally, after New Year's, going from 2023 to 2024, my dad decided to get sober and mend himself and our broken relationships. Nothing has happened since. I've never seen or heard that thing again, whatever it is. I hope it just leaves him alone for good this time. My family's demon encounter. From Nixie of the Night Sky. I want to start this by saying that while I do believe in the possibilities of the paranormal and cryptids existing, I also tend to go with a give me proof or it didn't happen viewpoint. That being said, I don't actually have any proof for this incident that I'm about to tell you, so I'll understand if you choose not to believe this story. My grandma on my mother's side of the family has, according to her at least, always been sensitive to the paranormal. She has told me numerous stories about her encounters with ghosts, demons, and even angels. She even said that she once encountered a demon in the physical form of a man on the street, and that she rebuked it after it tried to follow her home. However, none of her stories ever have anyone else to back them up, or confirm that the events involved were, without a doubt, related to the paranormal. All except one, which is the one I've decided to share here, since every single member of my family has recounted the event the same way. Now for a bit of context. My maternal grandma and my paternal grandma were actually friends before my parents got married. For this story, I'm going to call my maternal grandmother Grandma L and my paternal grandmother Grandma F. My mother's family also lived in Quito, Ecuador at the time of this story, and my father's family had come to visit them. My mother's family had just gotten a big new house. However, about 3 months after they moved in, all of them had begun to notice strange things. Doors would open and close by themselves. Their dog would bark at nothing constantly, and my grandpa and one of my aunts both recounted occasionally seeing someone just out of the corner of their eyes. But when they looked, no one would be there. My mother's cousin, who was staying with them at the time, began to suffer from awful nightmares. And when my father's family came to visit, they also experienced the weird stuff. My father specifically said that at one point he was in a room looking for something when the door suddenly slammed shut, and he felt an angry presence in the room with him. He was so unnerved by it that he ran out of the room and avoided it for the rest of the day. Grandma L actually says that she was the only one who didn't experience much of anything while they lived at that house. However, after everyone else kept claiming that they were seeing and hearing all these strange things, she decided to pray and ask that God reveal what was really going on. Then she says that she demanded the spirit show its face. The following night, Grandma F woke up suddenly in the middle of the night from a deep sleep. She says she wasn't sure why she woke up. As she turned over to go back to sleep, she saw a figure by the bedroom door. Tired, she assumed it was her husband, my paternal grandpa, getting up to use the restroom. In her groggy state, she decided to call out to him. "Ralph?" Then the figure turned around to face her. Grandma F froze, tiredness completely leaving her as she comprehended what she was looking at. She doesn't like to talk about what she saw, and I've only ever gotten her to describe it to me once. She said that the figure was darker than the darkness of the room. It looked to be wearing a hooded cloak of some sort and had red, angry eyes that glowed faintly. She sensed an aura of hatred like she'd never felt before, coming off of this thing. She said that the time she spent staring at the thing felt like ages. Eventually, the demonic specter vanished, fading entirely from her visibility, and that heavy feeling of hate disappearing with it. It was then that Grandma F realized that my grandpa had been asleep beside her the entire time. Still terrified that the demon would come back, she quickly woke him up, told him what had happened, and she said they both prayed together. However, she didn't sleep for the remainder of the night. In the morning, she recounted the story to everyone else, and since she wasn't and never had been the type to lie about something like that, Grandma L decided that was enough proof. A local priest was called to bless the house, and everyone also prayed together that God would keep any evil spirits out of the home. After that, the odd experience around the house mostly came to an end. My mom's cousins stopped having nightmares. Doors no longer opened and closed by themselves, and there were no more demonic specters. However, Grandma F is still shaken by her experience to this day, and very much fears the paranormal and anything to do with it. I can only imagine what waking up to find a demon in your bedroom would be like, and hope I never have to experience it for myself. Thank you for tuning in to Unexplained Encounters. If you're not already, follow and listen to Unexplained Encounters on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Leave us a rating while you're at it. Get some cool creepy merch at eeriecast.store. Check out my other show where I narrate scary work stories. It's called Tales from the Break Room. For more terrifyingly entertaining shows from EerieCast, go to eeriecast.com. And if you want to listen to Unexplained Encounters and all the other EerieCast shows without pesky ads, sign up for EerieCast Plus at eeriecast.com/plus. You'll also get exclusive access to horror audiobooks only available to EerieCast Plus members. And you'll get 20% off our EerieCast.store merch through our members-only monthly discount code. Finally, if you have a scary story of the unexplained, send it to me at darkstories.org. I think that's about it. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.